to galacticconnection.com, one of the most popular blogs on the World Wide Web today for alternative news. Stay tuned for the latest information on our world shift from enslavement to galactic involvement, as well as current intel on any blockages impeding us from our sovereign birthright. Knowledge and self-mastery are key at this time. Our commitment is to present you with the latest breaking conspiratorial articles, off-world messages, exopolitics, cutting-edge technologies and sciences, and also an ever-significant intertwining of spiritual support and metaphysical scope that one needs to dive down the rabbit hole in search for truth with balance. We are truly on the horizon of a new golden age filled with the promise for more love, worldwide peace, and accelerated intuitive skills, where every living being can exist in cohesion and abundance. It is whatever we envision and dream this new world to be. I say to you now, let's redefine the new world to the beginnings of our own precious heaven on earth. Galactic Connection is here to provide the pulse of Mother Earth through an eclectic range of interviews each Tuesday afternoon from 3 to 4:55 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Station 2 on BBS Radio, expanding your perspectives on how we can once and for all take back our freedoms, our joy, and our connection with our mighty I Am presence. Our intention remains true to connect hearts and minds everywhere in order to obtain global unity and galactic and universal acceptance. Our discussions will continue to cover anything to do with galactic society and our involvement with our galactic brothers and sisters. Our guests are experts in their fields, and our radio shows have been coined as some of the most thought-provoking out there. In addition to our daily blog, which runs 365 days a year, we also offer a realm of healing services such as our world-renowned implant removal processes, our spiritual past life clearings, our galactic violet ray alchemy from Alexandra, who shares in the lineage of Merlin, and other cutting-edge healing technologies. Check our site out at galacticconnection.com now, sending you a wave of light, love, and inspiration, and a personal hug and thank you for listening to our Galactic Connection radio show and visiting our blog today. Good morning, everyone. This is Alexandra Metters of galacticconnection.com. And today I have a pre-recorded interview for March 7th, 2017. Before I get into that, I just wanted to remind everyone that as these energies continue to ramp up, we really need to make sure we're double checking our trigger mechanisms within ourselves. We are receiving upgrades not only every week, but every day on top of that of every week. We are really being put through a compression chamber of purging as much darkness, density, in this regards, definitely thought patterns. We're all starting to question that, aren't we? The way in which we react to things that we've always reacted the same way before. We're really being challenged to look and foresee how that impacts all of us by reacting to something just as minuscule as being in only your life. So we're really being pushed to look outside our boxes, find out what that box consists of and where did we create it and how has it been holding us back. Don't forget, this is all the final purging, and the more we do, the easier it is on Mother Earth, as well as all of us, because we're all leaving. Now, there is question as to whether everyone is wondering who's going where and when. Remember, this is not a competition. Everyone is going to go where they belong. We will all go according to wherever we left off before this so-called matrix began, and it many call the game. Of course, we all kind of wonder who created this sort of game, right? But remember that it is super important at this hour that we not put preconceived notions of how the ascension process is to be fulfilled. Why? Because we create with our thoughts. Remember, really, really focus on your thoughts from this day forward, more so than you ever have. It is the most important thing that the master can do at this time. And I'm calling all of the enlightened beings, all of you, asking you to really hold neutrality with your thought forms. And that means really stay in a place of like, don't get too overly excited because we're getting closer, to not getting really pulled in with all of the unsettling news that's coming out, because there is more and more of it as the matrix continues to be dismantled and uncreated. So just wanted to pass that on. I just also wanted to point out the clearing out of the Antarctica bases. I was well aware of that before it even happened, and I'm just proud to say that I want to thank all of those who participated in a very long mission in getting prepared to clear out all of those chambers. That was an extremely crucial mission that needed to be done. So timing is everything. Sequencing is everything at this hour. And remember that. Don't get too anxious about what's the final game plan. Okay? So today I'm very excited. I met this man. His name is Dr.Simeon Hein. Some of you may already know of him. I met him at an IHCI conference and just really liked his humility. He's a very intelligent guy. He has some amazing perspectives on space and consciousness and how we can expand it. And I just was mesmerized when he was talking about the types of scientific data that he has found and compiled. Dr. Hein is the director of the Institute for Resonance in Boulder, Colorado. The Institute is devoted to the study of subtle energy sciences, including remote viewing, crop circles, and related subjects. Dr. Hein has a PhD in sociology and has previously taught research methodology and statistic courses. He first learned remote viewing in 1996 and subsequently became involved in crop circle research. He believes that all crop circles, regardless of their origin, create magical effects by virtue of their shape and the subtle interaction between humans, plants, and sacred geometry. How cool is that? In addition to assisting with Institute for Resonance crop circle tours, he continues to teach resonant viewing classes online. Simeon's most recent book is Planetary Intelligence, 101 Easy Steps to Energy, Well-Being, and Natural Insight, a simple primer for anyone interested in connecting to subtle energies on a daily basis. He is also the author of Opening Minds, Journey of Extraordinary Encounters, Crop Circles, and Resonance. You can check out his website at openingminds.info or planetaryintelligence.com or blackswanghost.com. So we'll be dabbling into various subjects such as crop circles, consciousness, remote viewing, etc. This should be a very interesting interview. So stay tuned, and he's coming on right now. Well, everyone, I have the infamous Dr. Simeon Hein. Am I allowed to call you Simeon?
Sure, no problem.
So we just got finished discussing some of the awesome services and products that Dr. Simeon Hein is offering today. So we're going to dive into that in a few minutes. But to start out right now, after sharing your amazing bio with people, one of the first questions I had for you was, it says that you focused on the role of technology in social and economic change, specifically on how technology can destroy information and interfere with natural evolutionary processes. Wow. Can you clarify? I mean, were you getting into the actual artificial intelligence field and arena?
No, actually the opposite. That came out of my work I did when I was, in sociology.
Yes.
I've always been interested in technology, since I was a kid. And I used to experiment around with making, radios and kits and things like that. I found out later that Steve Jobs really started out the same way.
Oh, amazing.
But if you have a value system that you are embedded in your life that you get from your parents and maybe your faith or your society or wherever. You wonder, how does this fit together? How does the technology we have around us change us in ways that we're not expecting, the unintended consequences? And what I was attempting to show in this early work is that, contrary to what we're led to believe, information technology reduces the amount of information that we have available to us, just purely on the sense that we aren't as paying attention to such a broad spectrum of information. We're kind of getting a little narrowed. So it's not like you're getting more information. You're just focusing more on a narrow stream, things that you can digitize. And what I wanted to show was that there are costs to that too. We often look at the benefits of technology, but we don't like to look at the costs. And the costs are that nature's been around for quite a while designing things, trees and planets and atmospheres. It kind of knows what it's doing. And the real disadvantage to technology is our sense of time perception. We become increasingly focused on very short-term events, and we kind of lose sense of history and long-term evolution. So we make decisions in a kind of superficial, narrow, short-range way versus looking at a longer-term process. And to me, that's really one of the big impacts. That's something that, you know, we need to make sure that we're paying attention to, because if we're only focusing on the short-term but not on the long-term, you're not really making progress overall. You are kind of taking from one bank account to pay the other.
So is it also significantly limiting our consciousness growth?
I think so. I think we can become too preoccupied with what's called nanoculture and too preoccupied with short-term, immediate sort of flows of information that don't have any long-term consequence. And what it means is we're not really working on some of the longer term structural issues within our lives and our society that we need to be paying attention to also. And you can kind of get addicted to this kind of short term information. We see it prevalent now all the time. It's actually gotten to the point where it's raising our auto insurance rates because people can't stop interacting with their phones. So we know pedestrian fatalities. I mean, I wrote this dissertation in the early 90s, and it's just interesting that I'm reading now that pedestrian fatalities are increasing again, and highway and automobile fatalities are increasing since the last 10 or 15 years, since the invention of the iPhone. I don't think it's something that Steve Jobs kind of intended to be a consequence, but when you make something that people interact with so much that they stop looking around them and they're always looking at the screen, and you put them in charge of vehicles that are going very fast and, you know, potentially as dangerous as a gun, but they're not paying attention, this is going to happen. And you have to think, what is it doing to the rest of our lives where, you know, we used to have time to talk to each other and really have conversations. And now when you're with someone, they're constantly interrupted by texting and notifications from their phone or their smartwatch. So we have to be sort of disciplined with it, because now this technology is really evolved. It does a lot of beneficial things, but it can cause us to lose some of our mindfulness and our awareness of just what's going on around us. And that's sort of what makes life in many ways feel meaningful, is just paying attention to other people and your environment, your pets, the trees that you're around, whatever you're around. And
well,
so
and the heart to heart, you know, and
exactly.
The heart-to-heart connection is interrupted immediately as soon as you're sitting there opening up to someone and they get a text message, and they've cut that stream and flow completely by turning their attention to something else.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a diet. You could eat, if in your physical diet, the food that you eat, you could just be eating really tasty snack foods, chips and things that are slightly sweet and stuff, but that wouldn't really give you good nourishment. Sometimes you need to eat your broccoli too. And we don't want to eat our broccoli. We want this immediate flow, and it seduces us into thinking that it's important. But, you know, not the vast majority of information you get from text and notifications isn't critical. And a lot of these things can be set up to take actions on their own, so you don't even need to be checking. Yeah. Our brain is set up to, we like stimulation, we like receiving new information. It creates a dopamine surge. So we've kind of created something that we like. Our brain likes it. We like getting new information. We're programmed to look for new things around us, but we don't know how to handle it. So it interferes with relationships and kind of just kind of things that matter, that are slower, that take time, that may not be as immediately sexy or, enticing in terms of the brightness and the stimulation, but things that you need to do to be able to interact with other people in a meaningful way, which simply takes time. And you're mentioning the heart. I mean, we know that the heart has its own intelligence, and it doesn't work in the same way the brain works. That's why we have something called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve coordinates the heart and the brain because it's very important that they're working together, right?
Yes.
And it's sometimes very important to slow down to make really good decisions. But if we're always rushing around and we're always kind of in our headspace, then we're kind of overriding some of the heart intelligence. I used to read, and I haven't seen anything to contradict this idea that the electromagnetic field of the heart is much bigger than the brain. It goes out a much broader width from your body.
Makes more sense to me too.
The organs have their own intelligence. I learned this from studying with Mantak Chia, Taoism.
Yes. Yeah.
They believe that each organ has its own sort of rhythm and patterns and intelligence, and kind of part of Taoist training is to respect your organs, literally, because they're working very hard for you and they have their own kind of feelings.
They do. Now, they carry emotions. They
carry emotions, and you could store really toxic emotions in your organs. Yeah. Now, the heart, just to mention, I mean, it's true when we communicate with people through feeling and emotion, people we love, people in our lives, it doesn't really come from your head. It's just a feeling. You like being around them. And anyone knows that even if you're just alone and you have pets or something, that feeling, right, of having fun and being with them. And it doesn't come from your head. It's just a feeling, and it comes from your heart. So the danger with all the information technology, and it's something that I think it turned out to be true, which I was pointing out in the early 90s, which is that nature designed things in certain ways, and we've come along and we thought we could improve it and make it more linear and controllable. But what we've actually created is more fragility and less resiliency in the whole system. It's actually more likely to collapse now than it used to be, because when you take out what you consider to be extra information, you don't really know what you're doing. You're removing things that you don't understand, but maybe those things are important, kind of like the discussion around so-called junk DNA, which is like 95% of our genome or something, maybe even more. We don't know what it is, but if you remove it from animals, they've done this, they don't behave the same way. Things are slightly wrong. So just because we don't understand something completely rationally doesn't mean that it can be excised from the system, that we can control it and manipulate it. There was, in that movie from a while back, Jurassic Park, right? Michael Crichton's book, Jurassic Park. That was always the perfect example, when Ian Malcolm, the scientist in the movie, says, nature always finds a way. The whole park goes crazy at the end. And I haven't seen the most recent one, but they think they can genetically modify the dinosaurs and bring them back, right? There's talk about doing this now, by the way.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Finding host animals for animals that are going extinct. I see the logic behind it. It feels compelling. Is you take animals that are going extinct or just recently extinct, find host animals that you could put the DNA in and you can bring them back. But the thing is, we don't know what the consequences are. So,
well, and that's what I was going to ask you regarding the cell phones and the laptops and the computers and all the computerized technology that's around us. Do you agree that they have inserted and manufactured these items with some sort of addictive frequency wave?
I don't know if that was the original intention. I know someone that worked with Steve Jobs, and I've been talking to him about this recently. He was someone in one of my classes, and we had it was just one-on-one, so we had a lot of time to talk over the period. The human fusion class, and we had time to talk over an 8-week period. And I just had to ask him the other day. He worked with Steve Jobs developing the Mac computer back in the 70s, right? The first Macintosh, the kind of square one with the different.
That was my first computer.
Right. So for a lot of people it was, and this was the guy who helped develop it, with Steve. And he used to go for walks with Steve, and I got to ask him lots of Steve Jobs questions. How valuable was that? So I asked him the other day, I said, did Steve really realize how much these devices will become part of our lives and become like glued to them, affect our posture, our attention span. And he told me that Steve really didn't use these things a lot. He didn't use computers that much. He liked to design them and improve them and make them fit within his idea of how things work and how they can work better and how things can fit in with nature. By removing things that are unnecessary to make it ergonomic and to make it more natural. But he really was a reader. He liked to play music. And he didn't never use them like we use them now. So it's an unintended consequence. And that's what sociologists look at, my professional training. What are the unintended consequences? So the unintended consequences are people have shorter attention spans now. We can do a lot with this, and we can organize, and we can create broadcasts like this. And the downside is that our attention spans are shorter, and we may be kind of losing grasp of reality in a sense, because we think what's going on is just what's going on our screens. And there's only so much you can digitize. When you digitize things, you lose information. And it's not necessarily a substitute for the real thing. Virtual realities are not substitutes for the actual thing, because we have bodies that need to be out in the sun. They need to be doing exercise, lots of exercise. Our bodies like to be engaged. Our muscles like to be working. They don't, all the smoothness that we've created that we see as, and Nassim Taleb, who has written about this in The Black Swan and Anti-Fragile, pointed this out too. Though it was something I was thinking about before he came along, which is that when you smooth things out, that's not the way nature designed it, and that's not the way you're designed. We're not designed to be around all these flat roads and square shapes. It's not natural. And the consequences are, it works most of the time when things are ordinary and normal, but when you get extraordinary situations, those systems don't have the resiliency and they collapse very quickly, like we saw with the credit crash in 2008, 2009. So our minds think we can design it to improve it, but often there are other consequences, unintended consequences, the way social scientists were, that you didn't think about, which nature obviously tested through millions of years evolution, found this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, so we're just going to keep this. It may look messy, it may look fractal and fractured and all that, but that's what works in the long run. And what we're doing now is an experiment to see if we can improve on that, and we'll see what the consequences are.
Yeah, it's almost as if we landed in this matrix, significantly limited in the tools that we once had outside of this particular contained space, and have been looking for a solution ever since. And we ultimately, human society has tended to always go towards technology, or with that matter, some other type of civilization seems to offer it to us and say, hey, wow, look, see, I have this for you. But I'm wondering, you talk a lot amongst you have like, my God, everyone, you got to check out his stuff. I mean, you've got online courses. You're doing crop circle tours. You've had your own actual extraterrestrial type, not encounters, right? But you've actually seen them, right? All that goes. I remember you talking in one of your interviews that you were a young boy, right? When you first saw your first flying saucer. So you're clearly, and yet you're very scientific, and that's why I was very attracted to interview you, because it seems like you're very balanced in the way you see science. I think a lot of people are wondering, at this particular time when we keep hearing about energies that are coming into the planet, how does the scientific world see that? Are they discounting it? Are they acknowledging that there's these amazing frequencies coming to the planet? I'm so curious what you think. Are they seeing that there are enhancements in the human psyche because of this? And also, actually, there's some people that are going crazy because of it.
That is a great question, Alexandra. It's a big question.
Thank you.
We live in a society that presents science as something that's evidence-based nowadays, modern science. it's something that we all appreciate, obviously. We like things that are based in reality. And if you go back a couple thousand years, a couple hundred years, science was based pretty much on what Aristotle said. And it was very idealistic. It was very kind of based on Greek idealism of ideal forms, ideal shapes, the Platonic forms, all of this. And science was based on that until very, very recently. Even medicine, we know, until recently, medicine killed a lot more people than it ever saved because it was just based on Aristotle's ideas and the Greek ideas of, humors and fluids and blood,
and
bloodletting, leeches, which actually can help in some circumstances, but it was based on what we would consider to be reality. It was based on an idealism. And this thing came along that we called modern science with all of these great players, which were really revolutionary for their time because they were saying we need to look at the evidence. We need to actually look at what's going on, not what the church tells us, not what Aristotle said and philosophers. Universities and places used to be very philosophically based. People got degrees in natural philosophy, but that's what science was before the modern era. And so we had this whole enterprise come along, which has been very successful in many senses because it's based on measuring things, looking, comparing, revising, not based on some ideals that from a couple thousand years ago, but what you see in front of you, looking at it and trying to make sense of what's going on based on the evidence. But now we've come to the point in the past couple decades where science itself has become the obstacle because it doesn't want to revise its sense of what the world is like. It's based on a idea of locality, localism, direct cause and effect, something you can see with your eyes and measure easily, right?
Right.
And what came along really to really knock the first brick out of that wall was quantum mechanics, because all of a sudden said, when you go down to the subatomic level, those rules don't exist anymore. We don't have direct cause and effect. We have non-locality, quantum entanglement, and properties that we don't see at this macroscopic level of the world that we live in, right?
Right.
It basically pretty much local cause and effect. If you put your key in the car, it's going to do the same thing pretty much 999 times out of 1,000. And that's what our modern science is based on. But what they're missing is that 0.001% where it doesn't work like that. And that 0.001% makes all the difference.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of evidence since about 100 years ago that there are other phenomena that you can statistically find that they're real things like remote viewing, precognition, presentience, as Dean Reagan calls it, a whole range of phenomena. And it got pushed into this category called the paranormal. And back a couple hundred years ago, there were actually people that studied the paranormal, studied these things like hauntings and experiences like this, precognition and things. And they actually took it kind of seriously. They didn't discount it the way we do now. Even people like Isaac Newton, they were mystics. They were part modern scientists, part mystics. They were doing things that were purely based on their ideas. And it wasn't seen as a bad thing back then. It was okay. And so there was room for these sort of phenomena without trying to explain them away because people experienced them. But they could say that was astrology, that was alchemy, that was something else. But science grew stronger and stronger, our science. And it really peaked around World War II, with the coming together of the military and the government for this incredible effort to attempt to defeat the Axis powers, Nazi Germany and Japan. And you brought scientists together and put them in large institutions for institutionalized science, made it big science.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the strength of that is you have these very well-funded, well-organized institutions which can do a lot and produce a lot and create NASA, send people to the moon, first create satellites, get them in orbit successfully, send people to the moon, send out space probes. The drawback, again, going back to what we were talking about in the beginning of our conversation, is there are unintended consequences of anything that you do. The unintended consequences were we don't want to look at this weird paranormal phenomena anymore because it doesn't fit. And if we are going to look at it, we're not going to talk about it. So we could have a remote viewing program within the military for 20 years, more than 20 years. And it could be successful. we could actually be looking at what the Russians are doing too and find out that they're successful with their program. But we're not going to talk about it because that would upset the very apple cart that we created after World War II of these kind of modern structures and institutions, centralized, bureaucratized, top-down institutions, which seem to work pretty well. Mm-hmm. So the very success of all these institutions and modern science has created these problems because it doesn't want to look at the other types of phenomena that are not easily explainable by direct Newtonian mechanics. So we're in a very precarious situation right now, especially since all the information technology is around, information technology, excuse me. We could actually begin to experience phenomena now that everyone is going to see within a few hours on their phones all over the planet that we don't have any explanation for. So we've actually created the very sort of potential for instability that these institutions were attempting to push away by creating centralization, bureaucratization, top-down control, modern education, all of this. But because it's been so narrow and so focused on basically creating efficiency and creating workers that can do their jobs in a very predictable, orderly way, the downside of efficiency and predictability is you're not prepared for the unknown. Mm-hmm. So the unknown has been there since the 40s and 50s, and it's been waiting in a variety of topics. Take your pick.
Yes.
Nobody in the formal institutional world wants to talk about it. Not the media, not the academic universities. In fact, they've done everything they can to push it away and label the people who experience it as kooks, schizotypal. They've actually become totally unscientific in their approach. Now, science is evidence-based. We have evidence for lots of type of phenomena. Take your pick which one you want to talk about. It's there. It's real. There is no doubt anymore that this is real, but we don't want to talk about it because it upsets the social apple cart of the sense of normalcy, of what it means to be a modern person. Mm-hmm. So we have all these beliefs that are actually outmoded now that say that can't be real, but the evidence is there that it's real. So what is science? What do these institutions do? I mean, I see it. To answer your question, that's a very long-winded way to answer it. We've set up a dam against these topics because they didn't fit within the Newtonian Cartesian paradigm. And quantum mechanics was something you could push away because it was so small. You could say, oh, that's only subatomic particles. At the level we exist, it doesn't matter. But all these other phenomena are around, and we haven't really had a rational discussion of them. We basically just say, well, that's just weird, and we're not going to look at it, come back in another decade. And we keep doing this decade after decade. But these phenomena are there, and they're going to sorry for a second. It looks like we have a little, okay. Yeah, these phenomena are there, and we don't want to talk about it. So what happens when you don't deal with reality for a couple decades? You know, we all know what happens when you don't deal with reality. You have collapse. And I can tell you this, Alexandra, because I worked at a research institute, an American-Soviet research institute in 1989 in Vienna, Austria, where there were lots of Russians and scientists from the East Bloc, and I got to know them and talk to them.
Wow.
And many of them told me that their society was much better than we thought in the West, that they had good apartments, stable jobs, childcare, plenty of time to do things that they enjoyed, low crime rate. As long as you were good with the Communist Party, everything was fine.
I've heard.
And then, right. So their society started to collapse 5 months after I met them. I mean, East Germany ceased to exist in 1989. It just, people had enough, right?
Yes.
People on the other side of the Berlin Wall saw West Germany and they saw the bright lights, and they're living in a place where you go into the grocery store and there's only one type of bread and one type of this, and there's no choice, and one type of car. And they wanted to go to the other side and they never got to go, and they just started massing on the wall based on rumors that the guards were letting people through one night in December '89. And it wasn't true, but so many people believed it to be true, they couldn't control it anymore. They had to let them through. And you know, East Germany ceased to exist pretty quickly after that. I guess that night it ceased to exist. But are we in the same situation now that we've been building walls around ourselves, our sense of reality? That's its own type of security risk, that we're not in touch with reality. And it has to do with all these topics, which I've been studying for the last 20 years, not initially when I was looking at all the information technology, but since then. And I came across these topics and then wondered, why isn't there a reasonable, or, we have conferences about lots of topics. Why are these topics pushed? Why are they marginalized? That's the ultimate question for me right now. Why do we marginalize these topics when you've got lots of good evidence?
So you're basically saying that the scientific community is kind of ignoring all of this rays and frequencies, which can be completely proven scientifically, from what I hear. And at the same time, I'm wondering, and just something popped in my head, what would you call it scientifically, that pressure that was building within the Eastern Bloc side of things, that was saying, hey, I want to know what's going on that other side of that wall. And it built to such a point that, it just blew and it collapsed. Do you refer to that as an anomaly? I mean, what would you call that from a scientific perspective?
It's a black swan event.
Black swan event. So talk to me about that. I read that a little bit on your website, but I didn't see a whole lot.
Yeah, see, black swan events are rare events that are really not in the front of your consciousness because they're so rare.
Huh.
And as a species, we tend to want to ignore them and push them away because we don't like talking about the unknown. We like talking about the known. And all these centralized institutions we created since World War II, we're so good at focusing on what we know that it's almost like the parable of the drunk guy under the light post. Someone finds a guy looking under the light, and he said, a fellow who's drunk, and the person says, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm looking for a key." And he says, "Well, you can see it's not under the light." He goes, "Yeah, but that's the only place I can see." So,
that's a good point.
It's like the saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So basically, we've created huge institutions that are just completely out of touch with reality. And when we saw this in the last election here in our U.S., we saw a backlash against the powers that be.
Yeah, big time.
Whether you feel it's pro-Trump or anti-establishment. And look, people feel that they don't matter anymore and that these institutions they're not in touch with them. And they're required to do things they don't want to do. And they just, it's the same thing you could see in East Germany a little bit. The leadership is saying one thing, but people are saying, yeah, but what's on the other side of that wall? Now, if you keep ignoring that for long enough, or in your own life, whatever, if you ignore reality for too long, it catches up with you. And the longer you took for it to catch up, the more the shock wave is going to be. So the black swan events come in because there was a time when the Europeans only knew that there were white swans and they didn't believe black swans could exist until they visited Australia and they discovered black swans in Australia. So there are things that are rare that may not be immediately, accessible or available to you to study, but they have a chance of happening. And we tend to underestimate them. We don't understand them because we like to present ourselves as knowing what we're doing, being in charge, professional people. Mm-hmm. Professionals have this tendency to keep focusing on what they know. Everything looks like a hammer. If all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail. So you just keep trying to make everything into the same nail, even if it doesn't work anymore. We keep doing the same thing. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, but it doesn't fit reality, eventually you become kind of detached from reality. Mm-hmm. And it's based on power, really, because if you had talked to the people in East Germany and the Soviet bloc, they saw us as the anomaly, as the kind of people out of touch with reality.
And in some ways, they're right.
In some ways, they were right, but in some ways, they were ignoring their own structural deficits within their society.
Right.
Which is that if you have everything run by one party and it's centralized control, it's going to create huge amounts of inequality and people are going to feel like it's unfair. And eventually they're going to be so ticked off, they are going to rush the wall in millions as they did that night. Hundreds of thousands. So what I'm wondering in our society is if we don't deal with these topics in an intelligent, constructive way, is it going to come back to us as a big sonic boom that we could have avoided, but it instead will cause huge scale transformation? Maybe that's the way, it has to be. But all I can say is we're creating that right now by not talking about these topics. It's the ultimate sort of hidden event. All this area that I discovered from remote viewing, all those topics related to remote viewing, and I didn't come across that until 1996, and it was after I got out of graduate school. It was something I wouldn't have believed in until I took it. Is that there's a whole range of phenomena that you can show statistically are real, but because people are so concerned about career promotion and tenure and the purpose of being at the top, basically we created a society everybody wants to be at the top. Mm-hmm. Now, that can be good for people because it motivates them to work hard and focus and be responsible and stuff. But the downside is if all you're concerned about is your status and your position in the system, you won't take the risks that need to be taken to make things work properly. And you pass the risk to other people. Mm-hmm. So we live in a system where it's the risk is reversed in the wrong way. It's not being taken by the people who should be taking the risk. It's pushed on the everyday people. Right. And it's a type of risk avoidance. If you do that for too long, you're not going to be, because the universe evolves, it changes, it doesn't stay the same. It's not the same as it was in the 1950s, but in many ways, we're still living under this 1950s paradigm of normalcy. But it's slowly eroding, and you can see it just day by day. You can see backlashes against it. You can see the whole society attempting to want to go back to some maybe ideal time that existed.
Well, just back to basics, we've gotten to the point, I mean, I would say in the spiritual community alone, if I don't get one, I get 50 emails over the course of a week that are saying, I don't really want to come out of my house. I don't really want to engage with the type of frequency, conflict, the lack of consciousness or the lowered consciousness, or all of the technology and the frequencies that are ping-ponging off of that. You know, it's like you're walking through a Wi-Fi battlefield. If you're sensitive and you've done a lot of work on yourself, you're really keenly aware of that. Yeah. So you've got this whole group of people. I just talked to somebody last night and I said, my God, these frequencies are kicking our butts right now, from the standpoint that whatever you have not dealt with, baby, you're going to be dealing with it. You know, it's purging, it's forcing us to look in the mirror and really look at our stuff and the way that we react, the way that we think about something. I think we're becoming much more aware that thoughts really are things, that we do create our reality. I think that realization is becoming so crystal clear now because there's not that much of a lapse of time with a thought that you think and then you get the reaction back. So I've been hearing that from a lot of people. How does that apply to the kind of studies that you've done? You know, you've really dived into remote viewing, for example, resonance, frequency. You know, how do you see all of this ramping up of frequencies affecting us in the way that we can cope with this collapse?
Well, you know, one person's fall is another person's rise.
Ooh.
So it's not a negative thing, purely negative thing. It's a positive thing too. I mean, things have to evolve, things have to change.
Sure.
We're in this universe here. Things don't stay the same. I mean, some of the constants do, like gravity, but maybe even those things change over time. You know, we have this false perception that everything is sort of static and your sense of identity within that whole system sort of fixed. But even those fundamental rules change. And the way it seems to be going is we were brought up from this 1950s institutional mentality to be like company people, to work in a certain way, to kind of be reliable, predictable, to kind of fit in, right? To fit in, to blend in, and not to make waves really too much, and just be kind of happy that you have a kind of a regular salary and just play the game and everything will be okay, right?
Right.
I know my parents grew up in that time. You know, my dad worked for the same company for quite a long time. I remember there used to be company parties. I remember going to these as a kid.
I know. Those days are long gone.
Yeah. And because you were a real company person, right?
You're right.
And you just played the game and you'd get, you know, medical benefits, retirement benefits. Basically, you know, you're kind of taken care of. Now, the cost of that is almost all your waking time was kind of devoted to this institution, this company, right? And it sort of gradually started getting stripped away as different people financially realized ways of acquiring companies, taking over companies, manipulating stocks in certain ways to own companies. And all of a sudden, all that work you'd put into that one company could be kind of absorbed into another company which may not care about you as much. So you realize that all of that decades of effort may not lead to the result that you expected, you know? I mean, because in the olden days, it really was that way. You know, you worked in before industrialization in feudal times, right? You had a noble or a king, and they kind of had responsibilities. So you worked very hard for them, but they were obligated to protect you and take care of you for life.
That's also correct. Yes.
So it was reciprocal.
Yes.
And you didn't have people higher up who weren't good at that, or they wouldn't last very long.
Yes.
Right?
Correct.
Yeah. So there was a level of accountability that we don't have anymore because
so true.
The system is so kind of artificially constructed from legalistically and financially that you could have people at the top who aren't even really good at what they do, or they could create dangers for the rest of us, and they even get bonuses on top of that. It's kind of unbelievable, right?
It is.
Yeah. So, so where it seems to be going now is people for a long time were rewarded for being conformists. Now it seems like the benefit is for really going out on your own and discovering your real true abilities and taking a lot more risks than people had to take in the past. I mean, when the economy was something in the past, our economy, at least in the US, that you could just go get your education, do a certain job, right? It was just very predictable, right? Mm-hmm. Even I know when I went into graduate school, the idea was, you just get your degree, and then once you have your PhD, you're done, right? And I remember people I knew in the 60s, they would get a job, someone would just pick up the phone in their department and you'd have a job, and that might be your job for a long, long time, right?
Yeah.
There was a sense of stability, and those days are not there anymore. I mean, people are attempting to eliminate tenure, budgets are getting cut back at state universities. It doesn't have the security. So it's flipped around already.
Yes, it has.
Being safe is now the riskiest thing you could do. Playing it safe.
I like that.
Because you won't be at the proper frequency that you need to be really good at what you're good at.
But that statement right there is the absolute pivotal point for the victory of not only the upheaval, if you look at it from a positive perspective, but those of us that are striving to really awaken and get to a better state of consciousness. That's actually the most awesome thing to hear, because we haven't been playing it safe. And those that have been trying to control this world have, in some ways, in some aspects, because it's like you've been saying, it's same old business. I mean, they're still using the same patterns, the same types of technologies, whether it's nanotechnology or not. We all know what their ultimate goal is, and it's pretty old and it's pretty boring. And there's so many of us that have the capacity to say, wow, I already see what their intention is. How do we divert that, and how do we stop it?
Yeah, I think that, Alexandra, I think we have tools available to us we didn't have before. You know, we were talking about information technology and attention span, all that, but there are some benefits to it, that it allows us to have our own individual platforms. If we use it in a disciplined way to do things like we're doing here, people can have their own blogs. I have, a YouTube channel, which was tremendously more successful than I ever imagined it would be. When I put my first video up that first night, I didn't think anyone would watch. I mean, I thought I'd get 1 or 2 views. I was shocked the next day.
Oh, come on. Seriously?
Well, this was 2008. I didn't know who was interested in remote viewing. I was shocked to find 100 views in one night on remote viewing.
That's great.
And I've been making YouTube videos ever since.
Well, it's a hot topic. It's a really hot topic. And, something that people are extremely interested in. I think you've talked a little bit in your other videos about how it really got its start from the Cold War, 1950s. The military actually had a budget for it, that kind of thing. But don't you think this has been going on a lot longer than that?
Oh, yeah. No, it has. And Aboriginal peoples around the world are always talking about it, whether it's in Australia or the Native Americans here in North America. They've always known that there is kind of these hidden senses. Patanjali talked about it in the Yoga Sutras from India.
And they just call it something different.
Yeah, they would call it something different. They would call it the cities. And they called these are things to avoid because they would distract you on your way to enlightenment, was to be omniscient. So, we had this, modernism did a lot for us in terms of raising the standard of living and the physical quality of our life. I mean, just having running water, refrigeration, it freed us up to do other things.
True.
But the mentality that it created also can be suppressive of new ideas. Mm-hmm. Just take cold fusion, for example. That, if you just look at cold fusion, everything we're saying you can see reflected in how cold fusion is developed. There's no doubt in my mind that cold fusion is a real process and it works. I've spoken to enough experts in the fusion field, the fusion field in general, hot fusion. It really works. Now, it's a finicky reaction. It can take like 100 or 200 hours to get going. And you have to have just the right materials in there or it won't work. So it takes a lot of work to make cold fusion work initially because we're still discovering how it works. But there was so much hostility.
Simeon, describe what cold fusion is for the audience.
Okay. Well, I always think about this every time I go through Salt Lake City because it was rediscovered by Fleischman and Pons at the University of Utah, Salt Lake. And I taught remote viewing classes out there, so I still have friends there and I still visit when I can. And right there in Salt Lake City in I believe it was 1989, Fleischman and Pons discovered what they said was tabletop fusion. Fusion is the process that makes our sun work and stars, fusing hydrogen into helium at high temperatures. And the reaction creates more heat, which creates more fusion. And all of that hydrogen, the most abundant substance in the universe, turns into the next most abundant substance, helium. And after several billion years, it runs out. But it works for a long time and creates a lot of heat, and here we are. Now, Fleischman and Pons, and they weren't the first, but they were the most recent people to really work on it. Electrochemists discovered a process where they were getting more heat output from palladium, metal, and deuterium, heavy water, than could be explained from a chemical process. And they suggested that what was going on was a type of tabletop fusion within the deuterium fusing into the palladium lattice work, however it worked. And they suggested it was creating a fusion reaction the same way you get in the sun, but at room temperature. Now, in many places, that would be an exciting development. People would want to look at this. But what we have in our country, it's not an inherently bad thing, is hot fusion research all around the world. People want to recreate what's going on in the sun here because maybe it would be a perfect source of energy, right? Mm-hmm. We could create fusion right here, fuse hydrogen to helium, create a lot of heat, and we have safe energy. But hot fusion is to get the temperatures of the sun, millions of degrees, in an apparatus takes a lot of technology, and it's very expensive, time consuming, and it's never worked for more than a trillionth of a second on Earth. Though there is a newer one in Germany that uses a slightly different process, a very complicated machine. Oh my God, it's filled with all these shapes and toruses and to contain the fusion reaction. But anyway, it's a very expensive, complicated reaction. Cold fusion threatened to basically surpass hot fusion.
Huh.
And billions of dollars go into hot fusion every year. So if you're a hot fusion researcher, and if you're listening to this now and you're a hot fusion researcher, you know what I'm saying. Your whole income comes from hot fusion and decades of hot fusion experiments that have yet to be done. I mean, part of the benefit of being in something that doesn't work is you can always say we need more money. So governments around the world have put billions and billions of dollars into hot fusion projects. We were told when I was a kid, it was always about 10 years away that it was going to work. And guess what? It's still about 10 years away.
It's just one of those perpetual 10-year cycles, right? Oh,
yeah. So they had a vested interest not to want cold fusion to work. And President Bush, the first Bush at the time, George Walker Sr., in the must have been around 90 sometime. Well, he was the president at the time, 88. Yep, 88 to 92. He even had a commission about it, filled with people who were on hot fusion research teams. So they basically said, they tried to reproduce it. No one could reproduce it. After a couple of weeks, they said it didn't work. It was just pathological science. That's what they called it. Oh, pathological science, and worse, pseudoscience and all this. Well, MIT attempted to reproduce it. They couldn't. The patent office asked MIT. MIT said it's not real. You can't get a patent in it. So people, if you can't get a patent, no one's going to take time to develop it, right, in our society, because there's no benefit to spending years of your life in something where you're not going to see a return. So anyway, the long and the short of it is, it turns out cold fusion really works. It's been reproduced in Israel. Our own U.S. Navy has been a champion of cold fusion. They'd love to put this in their ships, right? Because it's based on water, and you would get this permanent, cheap, sustainable power source. And enough research has been done to show that people have reproduced the cold fusion reaction. But in the intervening decades, we had people who were prosecuted at their universities. John O'Meara-Bacris at the University of Texas College Station, was investigated 3 times by his university for fraud because he got byproducts of cold fusion in the test tube. And they said, but if it doesn't work, how would you get those byproducts? His lab assistant must have planted them at night, must have gone back.
Oh my God, this is so ridiculous.
And this happened throughout the United States and Western Europe. There was a witch hunt against cold fusion. So as a result, we don't have cold fusion right now because there was a witch hunt and they scared everyone away. Fleischmann and Pons left the country. But I'm betting, I think the average physicist, if you talk to them, would say, yeah, it's a finicky reaction, but it doesn't work quite yet. But look, it's a real reaction. They didn't have the right type of palladium. You need palladium that's slightly impure. It's called doping. It's used in semiconductors. You can't have materials. This is ironic, and this goes back to what we're saying about the way nature works. If you create materials that are too pure, they don't work in technology. They have to be slightly imperfect.
You know, it's interesting. If you breed animals and they come from the same very pure bloodline, they have a lot more health issues.
And that goes back to what we've been saying throughout the interview, is our human mind thinks it can out-design nature and improve it, but nature knows what it's doing. It leaves imperfections in there because imperfections are a type of strength or resiliency. You know what Taleb calls anti-fragile. They actually make things better from error. So the long and the short of it is, because of that mentality, the same thing you're referring to, that it has to work like a light switch. I have to turn it on or it doesn't work. Look, it takes about a week to get a cold fusion reaction going, but it doesn't mean it doesn't work. Well, now there are new types of cold fusion called low energy nuclear reaction. And there are different people and companies out there working on these they're testing them right while we're sitting here talking right now. They're being tested in China and in Russia. And NASA has had conferences about LENR. So
are they getting a pushback? Are they getting a pushback from the government already?
No. They are saying we don't have it yet, but let's use it as a rocket engine, the source for No. The government, just keep in mind, the government is not a monolithic thing that's just like was one thing. Keep in mind, the Navy is many of the folks at the Naval Research Labs are totally supported. Who've been supporting this, and they've written papers and had their own conferences. Congress even asked for a briefing about this from the Secretary of Defense last September, and they didn't get it. Because whoever develops this first is going to have a very inexpensive source of power that's very sustainable. And it might not be us.
Yeah.
The Department of Defense wrote a paper about the impact of cold fusion and LENR, and they said it would totally cause a change of balance of power. Now small countries.
Absolutely.
So you now could see why they wanted to suppress it.
Absolutely. Too much money's being made.
Gone overnight. What was that?
I said too much money's being made
Yeah.
to control our resources, you know?
So it sort of comes down to power relationships, right? And
Yeah.
where the gravy is flowing. Now,
Yeah.
these institutions have been attempting to do this for decades, just keep it the same. And it won't, because, listen, someone is going to have a breakthrough in LENR, which is the new name for cold fusion, low energy nuclear reaction. There's a couple of different names for it, but it's the same sort of process. Some people say it's not real fusion, it's something else. But look, the heat that you get from these exceeds what you would get if it's a chemical reaction. It's not chemical. It's at a nuclear level. Yeah. So someone is going to have a breakthrough, and that's why Airbus is interested. There was just an article written in India in the Hindu Business Times, I believe, just last week, saying that this is going to be important. So let's take a step back again for a second, Alexandra. This is a type of black swan event.
Okay.
Again. It showed up in 1989, and we pushed it away because the scientists in our institutions wanted things to stay the same, and they don't want to look at anomalies that overturn their sense of the way the world works and interrupt their flow of resources into their departments from federal grants. So you keep pushing it back, and here we are in 2017, like decades later, and it's going to come up again. But here's what could happen. It could be another country that develops it first.
Yes.
People always say the government would never allow you to do that. It would threaten the oil industry. Yeah, but let's say the Chinese develop it first. Mm-hmm. They have a research park developed just for cold fusion LENR research. Let's say the Chinese get it first, and all of a sudden they have power at 1 cent a kilowatt while we're paying 10. And they're not going to listen to the U.S. government and say you can't. They're not listening to us right now about the Spratly Islands. They couldn't care less. They say those are our islands from our World War II treaty, and they build these little islands out there. It's horrible, and they create this destruction, the beautiful little lagoons, and they turn them into airports and little islands just to extend their sense of territorial sovereignty based on what they see as historical precedent to Chinese territory. But it's hugely ecologically destructive. They weaponize these little things and then they pave them over, and it's destructive to the wildlife out there and the fish and everything. But they won't listen to us when we say you should give those back to the Philippines or Vietnam. They're really far away from China. You think they're going to listen to us when if the government says, oh, you can't develop that? No way. So there's a race right now, covert race to develop LENR power.
Interesting.
And so if we take a step back, because I like to look at the biggest implication, it's another potential black swan event. Science said cold fusion wasn't real. Turns out it's real, or something like it is real. Mm-hmm. No one knows exactly what they're different theories, but what is going on at the subatomic level between these different materials, what's getting fused, if it's not getting fused, where the energy comes from. But you're getting more energy out than you should. Any of these events could really cause a very rapid shift. It doesn't just have to come from the system falling apart. It could just someone develop something that's so much better than what we have. And I have to give Trump a lot of credit for talking about this, President Trump. He keeps talking about how our infrastructure is really deteriorating. I mean, it's true if you look at it, but it's not just roads and bridges. It's kind of the whole sort of science infrastructure devoted to topics like this. Why should you have to study this in secret? Of course.
And he definitely alluded to the releasing of patented technologies in his inaugural speech. So that could really be to our benefit. It is looking like that's the way he's moving.
He could do a lot of good things. I have a lot of friends and people that are, just horrified by him in some ways. But I see him doing a lot of potential good things. I don't agree with a lot of his ideas and policy personally, but I think he is on the right track with a lot of other things. I know I'm not going to be popular for saying that amongst my cohort, but
well, that's what I actually, it doesn't matter. I don't care. I see that he is saying what he's doing and doing what he's saying.
Yeah,
and despite the immense amount of resistance, I don't even know if any president in the history of the United States has ever experienced the amount of resistance. For God's sakes, what about this witch hunt call out to everyone on Facebook to do some sort of chant calling forth his death. I mean, it's just so over the top. But anyway, enough of that. I really want to get back to, I want to talk a little bit more about the remote viewing, because you're obviously an expert in your field. And one of the things that I wanted to just immediately start out with is, what got you so fired up to look at this and say, I'm going to really invest a lot of my time and attention in this? What was the turning point for you? You said when you first did it, you were like, I don't even know if I really believe in this stuff.
Let's go back a little bit to the history of remote viewing first, before I got involved. After World War II, rather than things being completely over, we had this new so-called Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States, right? And that the Russian people have always been open to this idea of psychic powers and occult, and a lot of kind of what's been called paranormal. We can get into that a little bit later. They weren't suspicious about it because of Eastern Orthodoxy. It wasn't something that was considered as an anathema as it was to our kind of religious background, which sees that as kind of witchcraft and weird and strange, right?
Right.
So the Russians have always been interested in this, and there was this rumor back in, I believe in World War II, that telepathic experiments were being done between ships, something like this. And the Russians found out about this and said, well, if the Americans are doing this, we need to have this too. And this kept developing into the 50s, as far as I know. We never knew if these rumors were true about real telepathy experiments being done, back during World War II. But it made its way to the Soviets, and they decided, well, we have to have a program in this. So they started developing a psychic research program, which kind of kept going for a long time, and developed into a full-fledged remote viewing program over the years, right, by the 1960s. Remote viewing being the ability to access, non-local information about people, places, events, very specific information. Some people call it anomalous cognition. That's what Dr. Ed May called it, who was in charge of the program here. But our government found out about this in like the early 70s and thought that maybe the Russians were developing this sort of secret psychotronic weapons, right?
Right.
They, at a very minimum, perhaps they could spy on us or look at the location of very sensitive military secrets. We're talking about the Cold War here, so we're talking about thermonuclear weapons, missiles, all of this stuff. And this could have been a weapon that they could use against. No one knew how accurate it was. That was the issue. So scientists at SRI in Palo Alto, California, Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, who had their own interest in this too, by the way, were tasked to just prove it, basically. The military wanted it to go away. Kind of like cold fusion, right? Same thing. And now, the military developing after World War II, I mean, you had the development of this huge, entire national security state system. It never really came apart after World War II. You had to get all these resources together, working in kind of conjunction with each other to oppose the Nazis and to win. But that system, it was so effective of intelligence and military and industrial production that it never really came apart, kept going. Now, the last thing the U.S. wanted to find out after this fear of, there really was fear that there could be nuclear war between Russia and the Soviet Union and the United States. And then it came close to happening a couple of times. And we're all lucky that it didn't. I don't know if it would have happened. It's a whole nother issue we can talk about. But the long and the short of it is, the last thing they wanted to find out is that the Soviets had psychics that could penetrate into U.S. installations and know what was going on there, maybe even read codes and find out launch codes and all sorts of things, positions of submarines, you can imagine. Wow. So our own government started doing research into this with the intent to disprove it. Well, there's only one problem. It worked. It must have been the biggest shock to these guys to find out that it worked. No one wanted this to work. And so in the 70s, they created a program. They had natural psychics like Ingo Swann and Pat Price, former police commissioner of Burbank. And they tested these guys at SRI. They had Uri Geller come over here. And they basically took the people at the CIA and sort of flipped them out by doing things that would have been just impossible if you didn't have some psychic power. I mean, they had all the controls in place to prove they were in California, and they could see things going on the East Coast. In one case, actually remote viewing an NSA facility in Sugar Grove, West Virginia, and actually reading names of file names, code names of a very secure installation that at the time was tasked with monitoring Soviet satellites as it went overhead and picking up their data, extracting the data from Soviet satellites. And these guys were able, Ingo Swann and Pat Price were able to go in there into secure safes from a distance of 3,000 miles and read the names on the file folders, code names, security codes. It basically gave a heart attack to the intelligence agency. And I know this is true because the guy in charge of it, Christopher Kit Green, gave us a talk at one of the remote viewing conferences, IRVA, International Remote Viewing Association. He gave us a talk a couple of years ago in Green Valley, Nevada, where the conference was being held. And he told us what these remote viewers were able to do and what sheer sense of panic the U.S. government had that people could actually do this.
I'm like, well, you know what that's registering with me is there really truly anything that is outside the limits of not being tapped into through the psychic realm?
No.
So all of this, these covert spy flicks and everything else, it's all just a bunch of window dressing. I mean, they must be already knowing, if they consider them to be their enemy, that they're already sending in people that have those abilities and vice versa. Right?
Yeah, it is spy versus spy.
Wow, that is just fascinating.
And it's opened up now because Joe McMonagle and Ed May went over to Russia, and Ed May has contacts over there. He was in charge of our program here after Russell Targan-Halputov. Russell Targan-Halputov developed the protocols with Ingo Swann and other remote viewers that could make it accessible to the average person. And nobody knew what the limits of this were. So they were testing how good and eventually people like Ingo Swann, who unfortunately passed over in 2013. He's no longer with us, but he was able to describe in his mind what he was doing. And they created one set of protocols out of that called CRV, controlled remote viewing. Mm-hmm. And there were other systems that are more exemplified by viewers like Joe McMonagle, now at the Monroe Institute, teaches classes there. And he's given us many presentations, very open about what they did. And he had his own protocol, which was not based on the system that Ingo developed, which was a little more formalized. It's kind of a more automatic system, just describing what you see from a bird's eye view as you go down to that location. Now, not everyone can do this like Joe McMonagle, but there are certain people, for whatever reason, it's a whole nother topic why some people are naturally good at this, can then literally go in and describe what's there. They can find people. It's amazing.
Wow. Well, and I've experienced it myself, so I do believe in remote viewing. I mean, I know it's very effective, and it provides you a lot of information. I think I was reading through some of the words that you use when you're describing what are the benefits of remote viewing. And I'd like you to define, especially through your lens, how do you see people's one person's energy signature different from another? How do you define that scientifically, their energy signature?
That is very challenging to do this. It has to do with frequency.
Okay.
And I think a lot of this comes down to frequency. Now, the mechanistic view of the world doesn't understand that or look at that very closely because it's something more subtle, vibration, right? Mm-hmm. But we know that's the basis of quantum mechanics is, frequency, vibration, resonance of systems. By the way, we were talking about cold fusion before. It works with some sort of resonance. It's not based on a chemical reaction. So resonance is a really important key here. And it appears that remote viewers, I like to call it more resonant viewing, they can identify the resonance of an object or person in place. And resonance is something that is spread out throughout the universe. It's like radio waves. It's not local. Resonance is not local.
You're talking about like the vibe or the sense of what's going on in that room versus looking at the walls and the furniture, right?
You can sense it from here, what's going on there, if you put your intention on it.
Okay.
Even if you don't know what the target is, it still works. So there is some part of your mind that is like a supercomputer that dwarfs any supercomputer that we've developed so far, or any artificial intelligence by a long shot. It can sense a remote location and describe what's going on there, and people that are good at it can literally read words off a page that's at a location. So it is way beyond the sense of what's normal for an average person to be able to do based on what our science and educational systems say is typical human capacity. It's a vast capacity. Now, most of us are tuning it out because we're so focused on what's in front of us, because that's the way nature designed it. It's nothing wrong with that. You basically be concerned about what's going on in front of you, that you're not focused on non-local signals, unless it's affecting a family member or a loved one. Then you get the sense, I should call this person, something's going on, right? You can feel it. A lot of people have had that experience. That's the same phenomena. So we have this ability to tap into non-local resonance. It's never really been developed by our society. It's been something that's pushed away, considered weird, paranormal, alien. And so,
alien.
Yeah, right. So we're not comfortable with this topic. We would like it to go away, but it isn't. I mean, we were talking about cold fusion a few minutes ago. That's a resonance-based technique. It's not based on any chemicals changing. It's just vibe. The elements vibe in a certain way that they share energy, generate energy, something like that, more than it's being put into the system. Now, you asked me, this is a long-winded answer. How did I get involved with this? What is going on? I took a class in it in 1996. And I took a class as kind of a skeptic. I mean, I didn't think I knew special people could do this. I'd seen people on TV, psychics, some very well-known psychics, Noreen Reiner and Beverly Yeagers. There was that show where you'd have these women on and they would work with the police. And you didn't know what to think of it. They would do it, but was there some trick there? Well, listen, I was open to the possibility. I didn't believe it was going to work for me, but it did. And within a couple of days of taking this class with Dr. Courtney Brown at Emory, well, he teaches at Emory. He had his own Farsight Institute. So just to go back for a second, the program was declassified in 95 because Ted Koppel, there was a leak about this program. Oh. And all of a sudden, I forget the exact, maybe some of our listeners, I forget the exact sequence of events, but anyway, it came public. Someone leaked it to Ted Koppel that there was a remote viewing program. This was a special access program. This was highly classified. People didn't even know that you could be in this program and your commander in the military wouldn't know you're in it.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting.
That special access program. That's how a lot of things are done that are considered to be highly sensitive is you don't tell anyone who's not part of that program. You deny it.
It's very compartmentalized, definitely.
Exactly. Compartmentalized, specialized access, compartmentalized. You don't tell anyone in the hierarchy above you. You don't have to tell them about it. You're not supposed to. Hmm. So nobody knew who was in these programs. All of a sudden, there was a leak to Ted Koppel. I forget the person who did this. I shouldn't talk about it. I'm not going to be completely accurate, but the media found out and they wanted to talk about it. So they had Robert Gates on, who was then the director of the CIA, talking about it. He was a skeptic and he had said it never worked. But Jessica Utz from the University of California, Davis, was one of the statisticians hired by Congress once it was known to find out about this. And she concluded that the limited number of studies she looked at, it showed that it worked. In any case, it was declassified and people found out about it. People who had been in the program started teaching it, Ed Dames and Lynn Buchanan, Paul Smith and other people started coming public and saying, look, we're going to teach this. And we all found out about this. And so in 1996, Dr. Courtney Brown had a class in it. And I heard him on my local radio station here in Boulder, Colorado. And he said, we have classes in it. And I thought, I just had this feeling like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Find out more about this. It was just a gut feeling. I went to the bookstore here and got his book called Cosmic Voyage, which was about remote viewing extraterrestrials on and near Earth. Now, I really wasn't focused on the topic of extraterrestrials, but I had read a couple books as a teenager. I did read Timothy Good's book, Above Top Secret, just happened to find it in the bookstore. But it wasn't something I was really focused on. I mean, as you mentioned, I had an experience with my mom in the Everglades, seeing something come over that I thought was the moon, but the moon was over there. So what was it? And anyway, here was the ET topic kind of coming, something I didn't know anything really about after coming out of graduate school. I hadn't talked to anyone about it, been read very much. It was just a real passing interest. But Courtney Brown talked about this in the book. I thought, okay, I got to go and see what this is about. And so I went and took the class, and there, within a couple of days, you're given a blank piece of paper and a pen. You could describe something you couldn't see that was behind you in a folder.
That's awesome.
Very well. Now, that was a big shock, and I don't think I've ever really recovered from that. That was my black swan.
I didn't recover from it.
No, because, listen, maybe not the listeners to your show here, but many people, by the time they get their degrees, think they know how the world works, right? You think you read the journals and science magazines and you kind of know what's going on. And here I discovered a whole area that had been classified that it worked for everyone in the class within a week. And I could clearly see, look, if you were just guessing, you'd get some of the words right. It'd be vague. But this was like nailing the target picture, like drawing it. For me, it was a picture of Cancun, of the beach and the hotels. And I drew that in my so-called phase 3 sketch. And I could hear people speaking Spanish. And I thought I must be making this up. But then here was the target. And everything, it was 100% accurate. Boats, people on the beach. And that was like a big shock. I mean, how did I do that? I couldn't understand how I had done that. All you're given are random numbers. No one tells you you're looking at a beach in Cancun. You're given random numbers that are also on the top of the folder. It's just something, it's what Ingo Swann developed. It's a way, coordinates. And you can view anything this way. Now, here it was. I could see it worked, but I didn't know how. And so this is the beginning of a long journey to where I am now with all these other interesting topics is, okay, if they didn't tell us about remote viewing, Alexandra, you begin to have to wonder, what else didn't they tell us about? Yeah. What else was the government keeping secret because they didn't want people to know?
Very true.
What else was our society keeping secret because they didn't feel it was expedient for their careers to talk about? And how come I never read about remote viewing in Science Magazine? Now, I had a subscription to Science Magazine since 1990 or so. One of my thesis advisors said, hey, Simeon, you might want to get a subscription to Science. There's always something in there every month about sociology and stuff. This is a sociology department. Right. So I did. I still have a subscription to Science Magazine since I've read every issue since 1990. And I have never seen remote viewing mentioned in there once.
That's amazing. That's crazy.
Now, so this was interesting to me. I mean, I thought, I read Science Magazine. I know what's going on. And here I come across remote viewing, and they're respectable people like Dr. Jessica Utz, who are doing the statistical analysis. But nobody was looking at it. In our university system, no one was studying it, about why it could work. And so you can see there's a gap forming, a lacuna, as they call it. And so this is a gap here. I experienced something. It was a special access program. The government put resources and money into it for 20 years. And the more you got to know the people involved in it, the first conference was until 1999, by the way, that I could meet other remote viewers. We were pretty much on our own for a couple of years. I took it with Courtney. I went back and taught with him. But I didn't know what I was really dealing with because there really weren't a lot of people talking about it. Finally, there in 1999, there was remote viewers. They had a conference and became the International Remote Viewing Association. Wow. And anyone could go. We could meet the remote viewers from the government program. I didn't meet some of them until even recently because that was only representing some of them. Some of them wouldn't show up because that was the Ingo system. People like Joe McMonagle, he didn't like the Ingo system. So he wouldn't talk at this conference. But there were a lot of people involved in it. Slowly, like all these different puzzle pieces. It took 20 years for this to figure out who was involved. I still don't think we have the complete picture. I recently found out that our own defense establishment was very interested in the Soviet experiments, even Soviet PK experiments, that it was real. Our government knew that there were people in the Soviet Union that could bend things at a distance of 1,000 miles. And this was never shared even with the remote viewing unit. I asked people in the remote viewing unit about this experiment and no one knew about it. So one part of the government, and we can talk about this now because this is the 1970s.
Sure.
knew things what was going on in the Soviet Union that they weren't even sharing with their own remote viewers, who were up against this Soviet program back, way back in the Cold War. This is not true anymore. Our remote viewing programs have cooperated between now Russia and the U.S., but back then it was very competitive. So I still don't think we have a complete picture by a long shot of what is going on and what was discovered from these different research programs. What we did ascertain, to my view, is that it worked. I'm going to go with the statisticians. There were skeptics and critics and so forth who said it never worked, but I've seen enough evidence. I mean, Joe McMonagle got a Legion of Merit award in part for his remote viewing sessions. It said that in the award, and that's the highest peacetime honor the military gives somebody. 200 sessions with 150 pieces of useful, they call it essential elements of intelligence, but basically useful information. Now, you don't give someone an award if it doesn't work.
That's right. Yeah.
And so we're in this strange period where we know that there are things that have been called paranormal, whatever you want to call them, that work reliably enough that you can include them in an intelligence gathering capacity. And yet you still really don't have the mainstream media, the academics, the university talking about it. And this topic led to many other topics. First, it led to going over to see crop circles.
Yeah, I love that.
Courtney gave us the picture of a crop circle as a target way back in 96. I didn't even know what that meant in 96. What is a crop circle? And I thought, here's this pattern of the wheat. And I wish I had the picture ahead of time. I have it somewhere. I just saw it recently. The first drawing I had of my remote viewing of a crop circle. It was like a picture of a circle with energy going in and out.
Mm.
Very interesting. Circle with hills behind it with energy going in and out. Now,
Nice.
when I did that, there's no way I could have known what that was consciously because I didn't even know what the crop circle was. But here I had drawn a representation of hills, circle, and energy, and little beings, little people or something. Yeah, I couldn't identify what those were.
Interesting.
Could be people looking at whatever. But I got so curious, Alexandra, I decided to go over there the following summer and look at these things for myself.
Yeah, and and that's what fired you up with the crop circle tours too, right? You actually.
Yeah, I went on a tour with a guy named Ron Russell.
And you've been doing it since then? You've been doing it since that time?
I went on his tour, and what we found in there was a lot of real anomalies, especially with our equipment.
And cameras.
Yes, I've made videos on that. If people want to go to the link, bit.ly crop circle weirdness, I have a playlist of all of the strange things that in real time I take with people's cameras failing and batteries and stuff. So
didn't you mention that even you've met people that actually make crop circles, not actual extraterrestrials, who even in those cases you've found these phenomena, that it creates some sort of magical reaction, doesn't it?
Exactly.
That's amazing.
Initially, we thought, myself included, that there was a difference between the human ones and the ones we couldn't explain. And that was the mystery initially, is like nobody knew who was making these, the big ones. And there were all these different theories about what it could be. Are they from underground? Is it an ET ship? Is it, what makes these, because no one ever got caught. No one ever got caught until Matt Williams got caught doing one around 2000. And it was because he was careless. He went up to the farmer and asked them about it, and they got reported. But
what percentage of them are made by these guys versus?
So at the time, because of these anomalies to our equipment, we thought this has to be a residual energy that's in the crop, right? That's affecting the cameras. Let me explain to you. You could go in and your camera could stop working just like that, or batteries, or phone.
I've heard this.
It's weird things. Yeah, now it's weird. Now, as a scientist, I'm thinking, I can't see what's making these. People have said things, but I could definitely see cameras and batteries stopping. That happened first in 1998 to my own cameras, but I heard stories about it, and then it happened to us. Even at a distance, weird things could happen to your camera. So there was something about the pattern there in the week. Anyway, it got my interest in it. I kept going back. Eventually, Ron turned the tour over to me, and I still do them.
Cool.
And that's why because people have such a good time, and we do remote viewing on them and have a lot of fun. Remote viewing training, we go and see the crop circles and just experience it. And England, that part of England's really beautiful.
And there's a lot of activity in England, and a lot of huge wheat fields for them to do them in.
Yeah, a lot of wheat fields. Yeah.
So what about, that's always been a question, like if there really truly are some people that create these, how are they able to get permission from the farmer, or are they just blowing them off and doing it without their knowledge?
That's right.
That's right.
They're blowing them off and doing it anyway. Now, keep in mind, I mean, the land in England isn't owned by the farmers. It's owned by these leases. It's owned by the Crown.
Different scenario then.
It's technically a misdemeanor crime. The crop circle artists feel like the benefits outweigh the damage. It's a big issue, and there's a lot of hostility. But back at the time, we didn't think people could do it. It wasn't till Matt Williams and some of his friends came along and said, would you like to see us do one in the daytime? We paid the farmer. It's for an ad. They were creating an R in an internet sign, ad sign for internet radio. And we didn't think no one had been caught. We didn't think humans were capable of this. And it's just a good lesson that you can listen to experts and become convinced of something without your own personal experience.
Right.
And personal experience trumps experts.
Most definitely does that. And we'll tell everybody about we have so many things to cover. Tell them about your crop circle tours. When is your next one? How much is it? Where is it going to be? And how do they get in touch with you regarding that?
Oh, well, if you go to cropcircletours.com, I have the information up about it. Okay. And we have just a couple rooms reserved this year at the hotel where we stay. And
is it usually a small, intimate group?
Yeah, I like a small group of maybe 4 people or less.
Oh, right on.
People, we've done it with very large groups too.
How fun!
And, I like a smaller group because it's just a little more intimate, and we can go places on the spur of the moment when the circles show up. So I've been doing these tours ever since Ron turned them over to me in 2007. So about 10 years. 10-year anniversary.
Wow. And it's July. End of July.
Yeah. Now I tell people it's kind of expensive. I mean, you're gonna have to pay for airfare and the hotel. I pay for that part of it, but it's not inexpensive. But it takes some resources to get over there and do this right. But if it's something that you're really,
it'd be like a life-changing experience. A
lot of people feel that way about it.
Yeah, definitely.
And it shows you, what we spend the whole week looking at resonance, the science of resonance, and why it matters with shapes of crop circles, and remote viewing training, resonance training, and we do sky watches at the hills that have had the most activity of anomalous objects and things.
I am fascinated.
So it's a lot of fun if you're interested.
I am totally interested. I would love to go. Maybe I'll get back to you on that. So it's
okay, sure.
cropcircletours.com, right?
Yeah, tours with an S, cropcircletours.com.
Okay, cool. So now,
no, we'd love to have you come with us. It's good. And by the way, at the time of this recording, the pound is at a much better exchange rate for us.
I heard
American. Us going that direction then versus the other way. It used to be very expensive, and now it's considerably cheaper than it was.
Well, we just got the gold standard too, which should assist our dollar, definitely. So question, I was confused. Now, if people go up on your website, they'll see human fusion.
Right.
They'll see remote viewing online classes. And I think there's one more. Can you describe the difference between the three? Like, because I know there's so many people out there that would love to dive into this. And there's so many benefits to doing remote viewing, especially because it will enhance your psychic abilities. I definitely believe that with my whole heart and soul, just from my own experience. It definitely assists you in becoming more connected to everything around you, but not like in a freak out way. You know, you're more in tuned if you want to really develop your intuition. So how do you feel, where's the best first step for people if they've never even dabbled in this field before?
It's really how comfortable you are with uncertainty, how much uncertainty you can tolerate.
Interesting answer.
Yeah. Because all of these processes, whether it's resonant viewing or human fusion, what we're attempting to do is to get you in contact a little more directly with what's really going on, not what you think's going on, but with this information channel, which is seemingly hidden from us, but it's there in the form of intuition and perception of non-local events. And it can be tuned or trained to, you can focus on different things. Now, remote viewing traditionally has been about, it's not that old for us, but it's been about perceiving non-local events, people and places at a distance. And we know it was developed by the intelligence community. So we're talking about targets, just to describe, not to interfere with.
Sure.
Describing things outside of your life. And that's what remote viewing is. And those, I taught this for a long time in Boulder, Colorado. But the people always want to know from me, Alexandra, what's the benefit of this in my life?
Yes, absolutely. I was going to ask you that next. So
I would teach 3-day weekend classes here in Boulder. I haven't done them live in a while, but I put them online. I took the essence of the class and I put it on. And there's a lot of benefit to having other people around when you learn it, but people have to fly here. And that became more complicated after 9/11 and so forth. So I decided to create video classes. People want to take them from other countries. So I put up these classes. That's basically the summation of how to do RV in the simplest way that I can explain it. But people always want to know, and then there's a couple of levels of classes. There's a basic class for just starting out, and there's a kind of a 6-week video class that you can take where we learn more and more techniques, and there's more and more training. That is kind of the so-called virtual viewing master class. But throughout all these years, people want to know, what do I do with it? How does it help my life? Now, a lot of people have used it to try to attempt to win the lottery, do predictions with stock markets, currencies, things like this. Now, it does work with that. All the experiments show that I've seen, you can use this to predict what is going to happen in the short term for binary events, things that are just going up and down. Stuff like that. The drawback is it takes a lot of time. And that time, there's an opportunity cost. Opportunity costs are, if I'm doing this with my time, am I losing what I could have been doing something else, right? We all know about opportunity costs. And it's a word from economics, by the way. But the opportunity cost of just attempting to predict the lottery or a horse race or outcome of a sports game is you're not going to be right 100% of the time, so you need to do it repeatedly. Now, even if you're correct 55% of the time, over the long run, it's going to be profitable. You don't know which ones of those times it's going to work. The data show that so-called associated remote viewing really does work. People have even gotten as accuracy rate even as high as 70%. But it takes a lot of work to do this. You're viewing something in the future. You have to set up the session. Now, in that time of a couple of hours you spent doing that, you could actually be doing other things. So what I wanted to do was to create a technique that would create the most value for people with the time they spend doing RV to view their own lives, their own future possibilities, and to see how could I view myself in the future or view my future self coming back to me now to really enrich my life. Because I think the best way to use RV is to make yourself better at things you're already good at, things that you like to do, but just become more of an expert in that rather than trying to rig the system to predict the outcome of a lottery.
Totally agree.
Because those are zero-sum systems. So even if you win at those, someone else is losing. So you're actually not creating a net benefit to the planet. And I know that may sound a little morally restrictive, but I do believe that we each have abilities that we're really good at something that no one else is quite good at that way.
So agree with that.
If we become better at that, then everybody wins.
Yes.
We're better at doing what we're better. We have a more successful career doing that thing. And the other people we're around want to be around us because now we're even better at that thing. We can help them. So it's not a zero-sum thing. And I think even in terms of dollar value, the payback is higher than doing RV. Because if you want to do RV to win the lottery or predict the S&P 500 or things like this, do Forex or something like this with currencies. I mean, you're going to have to keep doing it again and again. It's never going to end. And you can make money one time, but you have to keep doing it. If you do something that's really, if you build a career that's going to have payback to you forever.
Well, and you can't make decisions these days. It's strictly all about me, 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 me. It's just not working that way anymore. The frequencies are not supporting that choice anymore, deliberately so. And I was going to ask you too, for those of us that already have psychic abilities, how do you see it assisting them? Because I think that if you already have psychic abilities, the remote viewing tends to be a little bit easier.
That's true. Before I answer it, let me just say, to summarize, the program where we do remote viewing ourselves, I call that human fusion.
Okay.
It's partly out of cold fusion, but it's the idea if you keep bringing your abilities and skills together, it's going to fuse and initiate a self-sustaining reaction of growth for you.
Okay, good.
And that's why I call it human fusion. You're viewing, I don't want to flip people out, but to make a little break here and then get back to your next question, it seems to me the reason all of stuff works and the reason it's real is because we live in a multiverse. As I talked about to the IHCI group, in Reno last June.
Which was mind-blowing.
Yeah, well, thanks. We live in a multiverse. That's why you can even do remote viewing, is because you're around all these different streams of other parallel realities. Now, normally they don't come through, but once in a while they do, and that's what remote viewers seem to be capable of doing. That's just the way I look at it.
Yes.
So I call it human fusion because you want to consult with some of your other parallel reality selves or get some information and then do what's best for the whole system. And I think if you do it that way, it's going to be best for you and everyone at the same time. You can take an action that benefits everybody, not just something that I win because someone else loses. We live around these zero-sum systems, and they don't grow. I mean, you could maybe corner the market and win, but you haven't really made money. You've taken money.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not judging it because I do some of this myself. I became interested in currency trading after visiting England so much and seeing the exchange rates.
I did that.
It's a zero-sum system. I mean, you go long, someone else goes short, and that's not a net benefit to the system. No, what I'm interested in is things that create a net benefit for everybody.
Yes, I agree.
So that's what RV is doing. That's why I call it human fusion. And that is an 8-week group coaching class where I work with each person for 8 weeks to develop. And we've had people in there that were inventors, people that were interested in developing a very specific profession. We had a woman in there that wanted to become involved in baking and have her own bakery. And within a couple months, she was actually working at a brand new bakery right there in her town in Washington State. But see, the thing is, you can't go at it directly because you don't know how the universe has this set up. You have to kind of follow the flow. So it's about teaching people to get into their own flow without judgment, because it may not make money for you initially or for a while, but just because it's who you are. And if you're more who you are, you're going to be more in the flow, and that's going to create more economic benefits in the long run. That's my view.
That is fantastic. And it's called Human Fusion. It's normally, how much, 197?
Oh, no, that's the remote viewing class.
I'm getting them all mixed. He has so many things.
So one site is virtual view. I'm not trying to sell this to people, by the way, but I'm just answering this, Alexandra, because you're asking me. One is virtualviewing.org, and the other, that's the kind of pre-recorded remote viewing instruction videos. There's one, and I'm willing to do it, by the way, that class, for people who are listening to this, for 117. It's normally 197.
What a scream.
Virtual Viewing Insight 2.0 class, which is, it's a series of about 20 videos that walks you through the basics of remote viewing. People have really liked it, by the way. I think it's quite a good value for that because I'm basically condensing a lot of my knowledge.
That's a screaming deal. So $117, virtuallyviewing.org, and it's 20 videos that teach you how to
for people in this class. It's normally $197, but I'll do it for, just to say thanks to people who are listening to this. Because I know if you've been listening to this for a while, I applaud you. This is a lot of material we're covering. And then there's a master class that's more expensive. That's a 6-week class, and they're both on virtualviewing.org.
Okay, so you have a master's class, but you want to do the basic class first, right? Don't you recommend that?
Yeah, sure. You could start with that and go over to the more advanced class.
Okay, now what about the one-on-one coaching? Because that...
Yeah, I don't like to talk about the price on, I'm not going to mention the price on that online because it's really more about getting the right people in there.
Okay, I can understand that because you don't want to waste your time if they're not committed to really wanting to better themselves.
I only let people in that class, we have to do a one-on-one call first to see if it's going to work for you. So I really am very strict about it.
Jive, right?
Yeah, well, I want to make sure people aren't wasting their time, and this is not a get-rich-quick thing. I just want people who are focused on something they want to become better at. And so I do a free consultation with them. And if you go to humanfusion.org, you can see a link to do a phone session with me, a strategy session. There's no cost to this, where we just look at your life and what's going on, and I can see maybe things that could help you, and if anything I have could actually help you or not, because it can't help everybody, but some people it can. And so I just want to restrict to the people that, when Toyota released the Prius initially, they had a waiting list, and they only let people have the Prius who they thought would really appreciate it. Well, I'm the same way with my classes.
I totally get it. So, okay, on the one-on-one coaching, is there a specific designated time, or do you just determine that?
Now that is, Alexandra, it's a group coaching because we do a couple people at the same time.
Got it.
The classes are as big as 6 people, or sometimes it's just one person, whatever it works out that time. It's 8 weeks long. It's twice a week. There's a lecture one day of the week, which is recorded, and then there's a question and answer session on the Thursday, and then we go through each individual's experiences. We do remote viewing and visualization exercises every week, and I want to see how people are reacting to this, if they're kind of getting... I know that each person can get into that flow state of their own creativity.
Yeah.
The reason we even need classes like this, mine or anybody else's, is because we've had a society that's restricted us from doing this. I mean, I know because I was in school for 27 years from kindergarten to PhD, and nobody ever talked about this. I was shocked to even hear about remote viewing or any of these topics. By the time you get your PhD, you think, I know pretty much everything you could encounter in life. And I was wrong. So the reason we need these classes, nobody encourages you to use your right brain, to use your creative, intuitive side. People who've done art and graphic design know about this, but most people don't do that. And they don't realize they have their own resources in there that you can rely on, that you just need to kind of wake them up a little bit. And that's what these classes are about, either the virtual viewing or
the
human fusion. Yep.
And so, okay, it's 8 weeks, 2 times a week. So what kind of hours, what kind of time are we investing each week to do it?
The 8-week class is a pretty big investment. And it's, again, for people that are really serious about developing a specific profession or skill or something. They want to use remote viewing for themselves, on themselves, to see more about what's going on.
Sure.
And
that would be me.
It's twice a week. And
like 3, how many hours? 2 hours, 4 hours?
No, it's about 1 hour for the instruction, and then a couple hours if the Q&A is maybe 2 hours. So about 3 hours a week, plus some exercise and homework. Okay. Because we are getting this information all the time, but we're tuning it out.
Yeah.
And this is about learning remote viewing is about learning not to edit your thinking while you're doing a session. To let it all in. There's a place on the page to put it down, but don't edit. The human fusion.
This just sounds, Simeon, it just sounds so, it sounds perfect for healers and practitioners that really want to hone their skills, because so many of them already have that intuitive ability. But to me, just by looking at some of the materials and how you go into ideograms and how you work on getting the mind and the thinking and the brain chatter and all that out of the way, and how you're really connecting more with the elements more than just the individual, let's say, it just seems to me like it would really expand all of our gifts.
Yes, I think it does. And if people are suspicious that I'm maybe even selling something here, I want to say that I have some of my videos. There are instruction videos of my own on YouTube for free here and there. And I even have a free mini class just for people to try it out. Just a couple of mini sessions. That's at rvminiclass.com, if that's not enough website.
Well, and I can vet Simeon because I met him in person. I hung out with him for a weekend, and one of the I will never forget this. Like, you're up there and you're doing this presentation.
Yeah, that was
And
something.
somebody was talking to you about a PhD. And what did you say? I thought I was going to laugh my butt off.
I said, oh, thanks for reminding. That was really funny. Yeah. So what we said was, they said, you're the one with the PhD, so I'm going to respect your point of view. And I said, people who have PhDs are not smarter than the general public. They've just worked really hard in one area.
Exactly.
And you could call it piled higher and deeper.
That was it.
Or posthole digger. One of my girlfriends used to have
posthole digger.
When I lived in Idaho. She wanted me for my posthole digging ability because I dug post holes all over the property for fences.
Oh my God, that's like the most non-fulfilling thing to do.
Well, after spending a lot of time reading books, it was kind of fun to go out there on the weekend and do physical stuff. So it wasn't bad.
Tough.
But so to get back to your question, and I believe that people with PhDs are maybe good at something, really good at something in a narrow field or something, but it doesn't mean that they're right or that they know more about what's going on outside their. Listen, they don't know what's going on outside their field necessarily. I'm always qualifying what I'm saying that. I'm not a physicist. I don't know for certain. I'm just suggesting possibilities the way it works.
That's what I love about you.
Oh, thanks.
I love the fact that you're humble and you're not trying to put yourself on some other pedestal when you're around people, and yet you do have a lot of background and knowledge about things that are very fascinating, by the way, everybody.
Well, thanks. It's just clear something's going on that we haven't been completely informed about, and we're not in the Cold War anymore, so we need to be finding out what's going on. It's just that simple. And I feel that. So let me get back to your question, though. I didn't answer your question from about 10 minutes ago. Natural psychics. There are people that are naturally good at this, and perhaps those people I don't think necessarily need my training or anyone's training. I'm really working with people who don't know they have an ability. It's to show you have an ability you don't realize. And the reason to do remote viewing, I should say, is not just to see things at a distance, to be psychic. It's to get the different parts of your mind communicating or in contact, to get the unconscious working with your conscious mind so they're not fighting up there. Because we haven't been trained to do this. We've been trained to do left brain, analytical, linear, rational calculation from our educational system, pretty much reading and math and memory. And that's good stuff. I love it too. I love to read books. I love to have my mind be really sharp. I like to tackle new topics. But what RV showed me was that we have another part of our mind that doesn't speak the same language as our conscious mind. The unconscious mind speaks with a different language, and we haven't been trained to pay attention to it. So as a result, we're fighting with ourselves a lot of the time. We get these instincts, feelings to do one thing, but the rational mind says do something else. And we don't know how to make a decision, right? Because we don't just have one mind. We have a couple different minds up there. And then you have the conscious mind, you have the unconscious, then you have your own higher mind, which is even beyond your one particular life here. Yeah. Now, if we can get them working together a little more harmoniously, it's a beneficial thing for you. And it just seems to me the way the universe sort of wants it. Because otherwise, we're kind of schizophrenic. You get one feeling, intuitively, gut feeling, you don't know whether to trust it. Your rational mind says something else. Then we get manipulated by advertising, by media, by big companies and lobbying efforts because they're just going on the mind level, and they kind of spin a lot of BS. Now your gut is telling you, I don't believe it. So RV tells you to listen more to your gut. There's different types of thinking, gut thinking, unconscious. And so the summary, natural psychics may be already good at this, but the average person is not a natural psychic. I'm not one either, but they do have some ability that they don't know they have, just like I found out. Yeah. And through this type of training, you can realize it does seem to take another person to stick with it with you for a while, to persist, to show you that you have these abilities that you don't know you have. Now, what they do for you, and that is up to you individually. But you have it, and I think it's beneficial to everyone when you're more of who you are than less. That's just my.
I have a question for you. Do you feel that in all the time that you've been doing remote viewing, are you feeling that you're more in touch with the other aspects of yourself?
Yes, I do feel that way.
Which creates a sense of completeness and wholeness for sure. It's one of the largest things that causes fragmentation.
It may not be super practical, but I felt that when I had pets pass over, and then my father passed over in 2011, I felt I was much more open to something I wouldn't even believed in before, which was communication from them from the other side or wherever they are.
Right.
Now, if you had taken me before remote viewing, I wouldn't have thought such a thing was real. But RV opens you up to very subtle signals and information that normally your brain could override and just say, don't pay attention to that. It's what you do every day just to survive. And the world we live in is to override a lot of little things and say, don't pay attention to that, right? But I found dreaming at night, I would have very vivid dreams, first about dogs that I had that eventually pass over like they all do. And you're really sad when your pets pass over. I mean, you can be sad.
Totally.
I mean, they're your little buddies. They're there with you 24/7 for 10, 15 years. And they're like, oh my God, they're just like totally loyal buddies. They're like your best friend.
Big bunch of love, you know.
Just gone. They're just gone one day. You have to put them down in the vets, or they had an accident, got hit by a car, and just there's that void in the house. It's really sad.
Yeah.
But what I learned from RV was to trust some of the subtle signals. And so I would start having dreams about them at night where they would tell me things, what it was like being on the other side. I even had a situation where I had this dream about one of my pets, Lucky, this English pointer, you know, white English pointer. Yeah. And a friend of mine had the same dream, the exact same dream about him the same night.
Interesting.
He was with other animals and they were playing around him. I called my friend and said, yeah, I had the same dream. She was also a remote viewer. So what is going on there? The same, you have the two people have the same dream separated by 1,000 miles.
Well, I just really feel strongly that that's one of the things missing for us in the spiritual community in particular is really communicating a lot with all the other pieces of us. And I would think that remote viewing gives us a little bit more communication. So
it gives you more communication, Alexandra, and it's important so that you realize that this is natural.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't had that training. There's no one in our society to support us to do this. I know what it's like. I did it myself. I mean, none of my university professors would understand what I'm doing now. Well, they would, because I've been able to I think I can describe mathematically what's going on here. So I could show them in a statistical distribution what we're talking about. But it's a kind of a lonely road. And I'm here to tell people that there'll be nothing but positive things coming out of this for you if you are willing to go into this unknown level of yourself and explore it a little bit. The worst that can happen to you when you're doing RV is you didn't describe the target. You drew something on the page and it wasn't the target picture. I mean, so what?
Yeah.
There's no negative consequence in your life to missing the target. You'll learn about yourself. But the benefit is you're calibrating this very subtle perceptual system that nobody told you about that you have.
Good.
It's been described maybe as a disorder of some sort of mental disorder, but it's not. It's obviously a natural ability. And again, the point is just to develop this so that you know more of who you are. Not to be more psychic than you are. You're already psychic enough.
Yeah.
It's to learn the language that your unconscious is communicating. Because people tell me the benefit of this is when they're on the road and they have a choice between two roads in traffic, or they meet people and they're not sure of the integrity of these people or if they're who they are, right? It teaches you to trust your instinct more. That when you get a negative feeling or a positive feeling about somebody or a situation or something you're about to do, that you can trust that. That's feedback coming back to you from the future. To the average scientist, they would say, what? But I'm going to say from a multiverse point of view, this is what is going on. You're getting some feedback from another version of reality, which we call the future. Sure. And you're in enough of a similar frequency with that reality that some of the information is coming to you, just like it's coming to you all around you from the room right now. It's just a parallel reality. And I think the data shows that it's true. I can't prove that this is a multiverse or parallel reality, but at least we can talk about it that way, whatever it is. And that it's beneficial to you to do this, because people have told me they got a sense of a person one way or another. They realized it was true because their gut told them it was true, because they had done enough. People who've been in my remote viewing classes, and then it saved them a lot of grief because they made the right decision based on their gut feeling.
Huge. That's huge.
And you were mentioning, I mean, I think a lot of children, if they were taught this, could learn to avoid negative situations because they'd realize this person is something not right about them. To avoid negative experiences, Yeah.
Negative people, negative jobs, negative marriages.
You get a feeling about that person's situation way ahead of time. And you know what? You don't know how you knew something, but later on you can verify that it was true. But your gut knew it way ahead of time, because our gut is this, our whole perceptual system, it's this finely honed thing by nature to feel the truth. We're natural truth verifiers at a gut level. Everything about us is to look at something and decide, is it true or not, pretty much all day long, right? Is it what it presents itself as? And we already have this built in, but we don't have training about this, and no one tells us anywhere in education, you should pay attention to that feeling. That, to me, that's the bottom line benefit for the average person.
That's awesome. And who doesn't need that? Because I think we all still ultimately can make decisions that, you know, yeah, we can learn from our mistakes and that kind of thing, but hey, why not have an easier, smoother path? And in fact, from everything that I'm learning right now, all that we're doing at this point makes it easier on the other side of the leap, the ascension leap.
Yes, as I was mentioning, my dad passed over in 2011, and the dreams and communication were really strong after that, and I have to credit it to remote viewing. It just taught me from a very long time ago, when you're doing RV, you're paying attention to very subtle signals and pieces of information, not loud 3D colored stuff. Very subtle impressions that you're told to write down before you forget it. That's basically how RV works.
It's like you're bringing us back to the way we really were designed to be.
Yes, paying attention to everything.
Yeah.
And it increases your ability. You know, the analogy is this. It can't really strengthen the signal, but it can teach you how to use the tuner better on the radio. The signal is there, and despite what anyone tells you, you're not increasing the loudness of that. It's not louder, and it's not very even remote viewing. You're not necessarily seeing things. You're getting very solid perceptions that you learn to tune into. So, well, at night, when you're not seeing anything else, those are very loud, and they become dreams.
Yes.
And so when my dad passed over in 2011, about a couple of days later, I started having very strong dreams. Conversations. Conversations about remote viewing.
That's fantastic. With your dad.
Yeah.
Right on.
He told me what it was like on the other side a little bit. And I saw things that are not visually even possible in our physical world that he showed me. And he mentioned it in relation to remote viewing and about the reality of these subjects. Now, before my training, I would have thought, it's just a dream. But now I know that that's a real signal from somewhere. And if you choose to, you can pay attention to it and learn something from it.
Right.
So I know I'm talking a lot here about this, but that's the value it had just at that level for me, was just when people passed over who meant a lot to me, were pets. I could feel better about it knowing they were somewhere. That's
I
my belief.
agree. I think
somewhere in another room, and you can't talk to them directly anymore, but you can still get vibes.
It's a huge healing.
And they still care about you. That's the truth. They still care about you there too. You just can't come with them right away. You'll be with them someday, so don't worry about it. But in the meantime, you're not alone. So many people, when this happens, they feel so alone. They feel so distraught. It kills people when their spouses die sometimes, you know, and it doesn't have to. No,
I'm just all for this. I'm excited to bring this forward because you've been on my mind for a while, and I finally got contact with you to say, hey, you know, I really think this should be discussed out there. So everybody, please check out all of his websites. I mean, he's got so many websites. He's got blackswanghosts.com.
Well, that's the new, we should tell you that's my book. It's just out as a couple days ago as a paperback.
Now tell them about that really fast. So blackswanghosts.com.
I have to tell you, this is another interview for another time, but I began encountering ET and UFO witnesses as if this wasn't enough. In my investigation of remote viewing, just being involved in this area, people would come forward who had worked in various programs in the military and the government and tell me what they'd seen, especially people from NASA.
Ooh.
We haven't been told what's going on. There is I don't know if it would cover up truth embargo, but look, this is a whole nother area. We haven't even talked about it. Really important. People have had experiences with these phenomena. They don't know what they experienced. No one's talking to them. Anyway, I wrote a book about it called Black Swan Ghost because it's about black swan events, and what could be more black swan event in your life than encountering an ET or what presents itself as an ET,
That's
directly.
Fascinating. And you're offering, tell them about your CD.
Oh yeah. So, I am a musician too, and I write music. I play guitar, and my stuff's on iTunes. If you want to hear my guitar, it's just finger picking. This was before RV, before college. I was always a finger picker. I still am a finger picker. I love the way natural acoustic music just makes you feel. I've always enjoyed that, and I make CDs about it, and I work with other musicians and things like that. By the way, my most recent song, Roswell, was accepted into the Roswell Film Festival as a finalist.
Good for you.
If you go to the Roswell Film Festival, you will hear my song together with a rock guitarist, Davin Nasser. We co-wrote the song, and she submitted it. She said, "Simeon, let's submit it to the Roswell." They liked it, and it's just about the feeling of being a. You did. So that song is about the feeling of being a Roswell witness, and I've met Roswell witnesses, and they either their parents couldn't talk about it or they didn't feel comfortable talking about it.
Yeah.
And they saw something or heard something which showed us it wasn't a weather balloon. We're not going to resolve here what Roswell was, but I wrote some songs about it. That's the Roswell song. But anyway, I made this sound up a long time ago, which I call aural resonance. It's a fifth. It's a C and a G note, and it creates a very stable drone sound that's very good for making any space that you're in feel very good. And it creates harmonics that are particular to wherever you play it, that are not in the recording, they're in the room.
Right on.
It can take about an hour for the pressure to build up before you hear the harmonics. But my girlfriend always turns it on before we go to sleep now. She just loves that sound, and I always use it when I travel. But it's good for meditating. It creates a very kind of beautiful sort of elevated feeling to wherever you are.
Nice.
Because of the harmonics. I call it aural resonance. So anyone who's listening to this broadcast, if you purchase either the Black Swan Ghosts ebook or the print-on-demand paper book, which are both now on Amazon, if you just search for Black Swan Ghosts or go to my website, if you send me your receipt, I will give you a link to download this 1 hour aural resonance sound. I use it on a loop so that it just keeps going all night long. Nice. It masks out. It's excellent at masking out sounds, but unlike white noise, which I use sometimes, it's not just a random sound with no meaning. It's a perfect fifth. It's called, it's called the breath of God sound.
Ooh.
It's been known for a long time, this drone sound. So it creates a kind of ethereal, holy sort of feeling wherever you play it. And if you just want to use it to mask out sounds, it's really good for that. I personally use it all the time. People who have played it tell me it's really helped them with insomnia, or just to put it on a little bit to kind of mellow out a little bit. Do not use it while you're driving. Just promise me you don't.
We don't want you falling asleep at the wheel.
It is going to put you into a zone state.
Wow.
And, I didn't invent this sound. I just worked on it with a synthesizer to recreate it. I heard someone else do it. And I liked the idea, but I wanted it to be a little stronger sounding, so I made a synthesizer version. So the long and the short of it is, if you, let's see, within, how about a week of this broadcast date when you have this on your site?
Okay.
If you send me your receipt from, because people will come in at different times to watch it. Sure. If you send me your receipt from Amazon, I will give you the email link to download the aural resonance sound for free. And it's normally a $10 download from iTunes. So it basically covers, your cost of the Black Swan Ghost book, which I think you're also going to enjoy, because I got to tell you, Alexandra, I had a lot of reservations about publishing this book. There were cases in there that the public had never heard about before, that the witnesses weren't even sure might not be some sort of security violation to talk about. But these UFOs and ETs have a way of showing up in all sorts of locations. And I felt that the events happened in many cases a long time ago, that the public benefit outweighed anything else that people need to know what's going on. So that's what Black Swan Ghost is about.
Well, so are you open for another interview about that?
We really should, because it's an important topic just in of itself. Boy,
I'm fascinated.
I mean, I just got back from the Scottsdale UFO conference.
Yes, I heard about that.
And so I got to see part of those and talk to people. And what's going on is really interesting.
Yes,
this is the ultimate black swan event, is realizing we're not the only hominids around. We're not the only intelligent species around. There's other folks out there. I don't know where they're coming from exactly, but they're there.
And lots of them.
I'm afraid so. So
yeah, I
don't want to scare anybody, but we're not the only.
Oh, my audience, it takes a lot more than that to scare them. Trust me.
So that's what black swan. If you want one website to go to for all of this, just go to newcrystalmind.com.
Thank you, because you've got so many.
No.
Okay.
My blog is newcrystalmind.com, and all of the links for everything we're talking about is on New Crystal Mind. I'm very, I put a lot of time and effort into the blog.
Okay.
And it has anything we're talking about here related on there, and all the links for the remote viewing classes, human fusion, and the books are all there. Okay.
So you heard it from him. So go to newcrystalmind.com. It's Dr. Simeon Hein. You can check out the Black Swan Ghost book and get the free download within 1 week. You can also check on the Human Fusion deal, which is a screaming deal.
Coaching class, yeah. Coaching class.
Okay. And that's what 20 videos.
That's a remote viewing. Yeah, the remote viewing is 20
remote viewing,
videos.
20
or 50 videos, depending on the size of the class you want.
Oh my God. The guy has so many options up there. So basically go up there and see what tunes into your heart. Go into your heart and ask your heart what's going to be the best for you. And thank you. It's really good to see you. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. Let's definitely set up another chat about the Black Swan.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. And also for people who, I have a YouTube channel. Just put my name into YouTube, and you can watch all sorts of videos. I even did a little update about the UFO conference. So.
And he's a musician, so check out. Oh yeah,
if you just want to hear music, I have a lot of it. You can just listen to it on my music page. It's on the blog, Opening Minds Music, but you can listen to it on iTunes and everything too.
I just don't think this guy is involved in enough stuff. What do you think?
There's not enough time to do all this in one day, but someone has to do it.
Somebody's got to do it. Well, anyway, thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. I really enjoyed it.
From my heart to yours, sending you lots of love, joy, and excitement about truly a time that we've all been waiting for. And apparently he calls it a Black Swan event that's coming. And we are all knowing that this is really, truly why we're here. We've come here for this moment. We've worked up to this moment. And I just feel like something like this could really help us. It definitely can help us even on the other side, because we're never going to stop training. We're never going to stop educating. We're never going to stop learning. So anyway, if you have any questions, just drop us a line. And as usual, you can always check out Galactic Connection 365 days a year for our free blog dealing with all kinds of cool issues and topics, as well as you can check out all of our healing services, everything from implant removal, soul retrieval, DNA sequencing, protection from EMFs, gosh, you name it. If you've got issues with mind control, super soldiering, that kind of thing, we even have some options for that as well. So stay tuned for next week, and thank you again for being part of Galactic Connection. Take care.